My name is Percy Jackson. I am a demigod.
But they're very much doing like trios on both sides. Like Luke's team of like Chris Rodriguez and Allison and Luke versus Percy and Annabeth and Grover or Tyson. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting how that's a like a smart idea to kind of mirror them in different ways. And it's like very fascinating to think about like what they will change or what they will add in for, because Allison obviously doesn't exist in the books and Chris Rodriguez doesn't have that much of a part in Sea of Monsters. But considering that they recasted him and Becky said basically like forget about the person who used to play him, he's a completely different person now, that makes me think that he has like more of a role than he did in the original books. We talk about like the whole mole stuff that I hope for them to do is that I kind of hope that they give us hints in this season that there is a mole at camp by how Luke knows everything about what's going on there. But I hope that they don't tell us who it is. Because that's fun for like the kids that are watching that haven't read the books yet. And it's also just fun in general just to see like if they change who it is, if they add in like Selena next season, or if she is in this season but they just haven't told us yet. The one thing I think could be interesting too is Clarice, that she's a main character. And I know I've said this a million times, but the scene that I want the most in this season is when Ares is being an abusive person towards her and is like threatening to hit her when he's not even physically there. I specifically want like Percy to see that and just be like, oh, damn it. And just like not know how to respond to that. Just to have it be something of like, oh, I actually understand this person. It's one of those things of that I was kind of saying last week that like you don't need to be gross about showing traumatic things. You can show that kind of stuff without it being exploitative or just like too much. Like you don't need to show a kid being hit in order to give the clear idea that a kid has been hit and also recognizes that somebody else has been before. And a scene like that is a very like easy way to do it. But the thing with Clarice is interesting because we know from the little bitty trailer they put out that was actually part of like a Disney overall trailer for this year that him and Clarice get in a full on like fight at a certain point, and so part of me is like curious what happens that makes her start to like him. Maybe it's the end when he gives her the fleece.
Maybe. Yeah. And I'm sure they probably place the fight. I mean, they almost fight when she helps them with the Hydra, right? And she's just like, oh, you guys are here? You're not supposed to be here. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so the other thing from that that I thought of that I was like, I don't know why I never thought of this before, but it was basically just about like, will Luke try to recruit Clarice? And because he tries to recruit everybody else, and he tries to recruit Annabeth, he tries to recruit Thalia, he does successfully recruit some other kids that we know of in the books. And so it would make sense that he would at least try to recruit Clarice, especially if in this version of it, they have them run into each other more. Or run into like Allison or Chris Rodriguez or something, especially considering Clarice and Chris Rodriguez, that would make a lot of sense. Like a lot of sense if they would have him try to recruit her. Because they already have like, you know, something happens with them in later books. And the main thing that I think will be really interesting about season 2 is the Thalia and Luke and Annabeth flashbacks. Especially the Thalia and Luke flashbacks. And I did a video the other day saying that like Luke apologists, like the clock is ticking. when it comes to like how long this is going to last for you. And the thing I was thinking about were these flashbacks, because it's a lot easier, I think, for you to be like, Luke is just misunderstood. But watching it actually happen on the TV show is going to be, especially them saying that the season ends like setting up a much darker season three. There is only one person. There is one person, one that could be about. It is Luke, and there's just so many different things that they could show us in different ways to kind of,
Oh, they could show us him taking Kronos into his body.
yeah. And like the dream that Percy has right before the siren scene is him seeing that happening with Thalia, but he doesn't know it's Thalia yet, and that is a freaky, scary dream that has to be in this season somewhere. But it's also just not only that stuff happening in like the now, but it's also adding in him trying to kill all of them at the very end while also bringing up what happened in the past. And there's just like so many things that they could add in to show us. Like we've never. One thing Walker actually said was that he was talking about Zeus, that the new Courtney, I can't remember, Courtney Vance, who plays Zeus in the season. He said that he didn't have any scenes with him, but that the people who did were like really excited about it. And I can only imagine that the people are like probably Tamara and Charlie. And because the only place I can imagine Zeus showing up is with Thalia in like flashbacks or something like that. Or him showing up like when he has to turn her into a tree and trying to do something to Luke. Or something like that, or just being angry or upset or whatever, because I'm sure that he was in that moment. But there's just a lot there of like how Thalia and Luke met, like how the thing I always think is really interesting about that stuff is that Luke tells Annabeth about what happened, but that's like his perspective of what happened. And like Annabeth remembers a little bit, but she was a little kid and didn't really know what was going on. She only can go on what Luke tells her because the other person that was there is dead for most of that time until she's not dead anymore and tries to talk to her about it, and she doesn't listen to her anymore at that point. But like because of that, it's a very interesting thing of like perspective, or like how people see the same thing very differently, that they could show that kind of thing of, we know like what Luke has said happened, but that may not line up with what she feels happened or like what actually happened. And the show showing us those flashbacks of how they met, or like what he was like before Kronos ever was around him at all, is a very interesting thing to wonder about, like because Kronos wasn't there. He wasn't manipulating him for many years when him and Thalia were together and when she died. And so it is a very interesting kind of outlook to see him back then and to see if he's different than how we would imagine him to be or not. And especially like setting up stuff for like the future. It's just, there's so much with her there with him that they could easily show, because no matter what happens, he definitely like let her down in a big way, many times in a row, and like for like a while. And that Thalia of that time would probably point that out instead of the Thalia that is a tree and cannot say that to people. Set up in a lot of different ways to show like how dark Luke is, because season 3 we will get scenes of him torturing Annabeth. Mm-hmm. Like, get ready for that now, because there will absolutely be scenes of him mentally, emotionally, physically, like verbally, like abusing her and torturing her when she is being held captive by him. She goes into that being upset with him, and she leaves that defending him, wanting to take him to Olympus so that he can like make friends with all the gods that he's been trying to kill. Like, he does a number on her brain during that season, when in the books you don't see her. The TV show, we will see her because it's a TV show, and that's what we're going to have to watch. And so in order for that to make sense, they have to set up Luke to be somebody that is so like devoid from empathy for people that he says that he loves,
Yeah.
that he would do that to her and like trap her in that, especially because in Titan's Curse the entire way she gets trapped is by him acting like he's in danger,
Hmm.
because he knew that that would get her, that would trap her underneath the sky. Like,
Yeah.
that is just so disgusting. To know that somebody cares about you and to use that to like trap them into something so that you can torture them for the next week.
Yeah, I'm on board with Percy of like, how did he survive that? He shouldn't have been allowed to survive that.
No, he should not have been allowed to survive that. And the other stuff with that thing too is like the interaction with Annabeth and like the Cyclops.
Mhm.
Um, it's like a whole thing of just Luke does one of the things that is always that I think this series does well, that I enjoy when people write like abusive sort of characters like this well, is that they kind of show how the decisions they make affect a lot of people around them in
Mhm.
a way that they don't necessarily mean to. Like how I was talking about how like Luke is okay with Grover thinking that everything was his fault because then he doesn't have to deal with people being upset with him. And if Thalia was mad at him before any of this stuff happened, he wouldn't want anybody else to be mad at him. And so if he doesn't have to deal with it if she's gone and nobody else blames him. But it's like that sort of a thing. Like they're not actively thinking about it that way, but it's more that they're okay with that stuff happening if it means that they get what they want. And so like Annabeth being horribly traumatized by having to stab a Cyclops in the foot when she's 7 and then watch Thalia die right after that is one of those things happen because of the decisions that Luke was making at the time. And she was the one that got like he was obviously also traumatized by what happened with Thalia and stuff, but that's something that is so scary to her that 5 years later it's affecting how she treats Tyson in that season, and it's a huge part of her storyline in that season, that she's so scared of those things that happened to her in the past that it's making her act a way that's not who she really is,
Yeah.
which is a theme overall for her as the books go on with Luke. But it's just like that's something that he did to her, and she like doesn't realize that. But there's a lot of stuff like that with him where you just kind of see how, because his choices are like me first, no
Mhm.
matter what, like you see kind of like how other people are affected by those choices that he's making in a way that he just doesn't, it's not that he doesn't think about how it would affect other people, he just doesn't care.
I also suspect that, and I bought you Demigod Diaries for your birthday partially because I need the Luke slander cure. I have a feeling that if we read that and the actual account of what had been happening, it wasn't more so that he was angry that the gods let that happen to her, but more so that he was angry that it happened on his watch while he was trying to play big bad hero.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I was saying this to a friend of mine tonight about Luke, but a lot of what Luke actually thinks, you can see by how he describes things in the world when he's introducing it to Percy before you know who he really is. And he describes the quest as like you go on a quest to be big and bad and do these really cool things so that people like will remember your name for like generations, and people will be afraid of you, people will do what you want, people want to be friends with you because you have like this notoriety basically by doing these things. He sees quests as like like fun fun things to do. And so the reason why he turns against the gods when he isn't able to kill the Dawn when he's 16 is because to him like that's the way that he gets everybody to like be obsessed with him and to love him and adore him, because he doesn't notice that people already do. Everyone at camp already loves him, but he feels like he has to do this to be the absolute best so everybody will always know him. I was saying to that friend that I feel like him knowing about Hermes since he was a kid made him feel like he was better than other kids, that he like knew who he was the entire time, that he had met his dad, that he knew who his dad was when most of them don't for so long, and that made him like need to like prove that in that way and willing to like line up with Kronos so that he can be the best and like even if it means that he is hurting everybody, he still gets to be like the most powerful. Is that sweet baby Tyson is
Yeah.
also affected by Luke. Like Annabeth is horrible to him because of stuff that Luke did. And
Yeah.
I'm like, he is a sweet baby child. Like,
Yeah, it's like we know she genuinely trusts Percy. She trusts his judge of character. We know even her saying, like, I'm not gonna be nice to this one person who's been following you around is out of character.
mhm. And it's just Tyson is such like a genuinely kind-hearted, sweet little person that there is nothing about him that you could see and be like, there's something wrong with you. And so the fact that she sees him like that, you can literally see her like fighting against like what she knows she should be doing, but she just like can't stop being afraid of him. And that's like what trauma does to your brain, but that's because of the things that Luke did to her. Like the things that the decisions that he makes affects people for years afterwards. Like Percy is still traumatized by Luke years after he's dead and will be partly for the rest of his life probably. And it's like you can't just like do these things and just be like you can't be upset with me or like expect people to not be upset because this is how these things happen. And my note, it's also Luke's fault, so that's fun. And I'm like, yeah, everything is his fault. Have you noticed that yet?
Yeah, so we have the growing tension between them romantically that is also fueled by this fight a little bit in a way. And that's going to be another thing that it'll be interesting to see how they handle because of the kids getting so much older and like how awkward will that be for Walker and Leah in the scenes where there is a little bit more tension or things like that.
Before, like you made a video about this that we said that we think that thanks to your brother that the people on the ghosts on her ship are like different people from different eras, which is like really fun. I still hope that they can't speak the same language because it would just be really funny to watch them all try like yelling at each other about like I like the idea of them trying to fight like Scylla and Charybdis and then messing it up because they literally cannot understand each other and they're just and like cannot communicate at all because even in death they like you wouldn't like suddenly know a different language at least in the way that they present those ghosts. I really like Chiron in Sea of Monsters, especially at the end. One of my favorite scenes in Sea of Monsters that I haven't brought up yet is in any way really is when when he helps them get away from Luke and then he talks to Percy about the whole thing about the gods want to kill me and he tells him a little bit about the prophecy. But the way that that's one of my favorite scenes, honestly, in the books is when Chiron tells him about it. Because the way that he tells him about it, he makes it very clear to him that it's his choice.
Yeah.
And that if he doesn't want to do it, he can say no. And he tells him, you can say no. Nobody can make you do this. If you don't want to do this is not like your responsibility. Nobody can force you to do anything. If you don't want to do this, then you're not going to. And that's like the end of it. And it's just Chiron is such a good like figure like that where he actually loves Percy and does try to help him with everything that he has to deal with. And so his whole storyline of being like kicked out of camp because of his dad being Kronos and stuff and then being able to save them at the end and be there to like help him deal with that and figure out how he feels about it before they go back to camp and stuff is just a really nice thing that's in Sea of Monsters, and I hope we still get that in the book because Chiron, not exaggerating, is the only person that remembers that Percy has feelings in Titan's Curse. It's Chiron and Bessie. That's it. No one else remembers that. So it was basically like Polyphemus is talked about in Sea of Monsters as a very like much more empathetic way. Like they literally talk mad shit about Odysseus for how he treated Polyphemus, and like he has no reason not to hate. Like Percy literally says, like I would also hate humans if they treated me the way that Odysseus treated him. And so why wouldn't he hate me? Like he has every reason to. And you feel very bad for Polyphemus. You have a lot of empathy by the time they're leaving him on his island, even though he's trying to kill them.
Yeah.
They're still able to have empathy for him, and just like the endless problems that they run into in this season, it just like never really stops. Like once her, oh yeah, one note I wrote that I just skipped over was Hermes. My God, the drama, because it's Hermes. But like when Hermes shows up at camp and is like, "Hey, get on that boat right there that I'm not going to tell you has my murderous son on it." As soon as that happens, it just like never really stops for them until the book is over, and that's still not over because Thalia is now alive, and they're like, "What's going on?" But also one thing to add on with that is I'm almost curious to see if they add a scene at the end of the season of Chiron having to like tell her about Luke, or not, because somebody had to tell her, and it would be very interesting if they let us see her finding that out, especially if they add on like ending flashbacks with them of him doing horrible things in the past that might like foreshadow why him being like that might not be as completely shocking to her as it was for everyone else. It's still obviously upsetting to her, but she doesn't. The way she talks to him in Titan's Curse, it's not like she's completely surprised that he's that angry.